The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast arena with hundreds of seats arranged in perfect circles around a central speaking platform. Representatives from 47 different species filled those seats, their forms ranging from the crystalline beauty of the Andromedans to the writhing tentacles of the aquatic collective. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of different languages into something resembling universal understanding. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the center platform, his simple blue uniform-looking plain against the elaborate robes and biomechanical enhancements worn by the other delegates. Behind him, Captain Lisa Rodriguez and 3 other human officers waited in silence, their faces showing the strain of what they knew would be a difficult presentation. The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for only 2 years, and their every suggestion was met with skepticism or outright dismissal. Morrison cleared his throat and activated the holographic display system. Images of burning space stations and destroyed colonies flickered to life above the assembly. The silence in the chamber was heavy and uncomfortable as the scenes of destruction played out in vivid detail. "Honored delegates," Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "The pirate attacks on the Outer Rim have increased by 300% in the past 6 months. The Crimson Swarm and their allies have destroyed 17 colonies and killed over 2 million innocent beings. Current defense strategies are clearly failing." A low murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. The Zephyrian representative, Councillor Korthzel, shifted his crystalline form and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "The human delegation states the obvious. We are all aware of the pirate threat. What we need are solutions, not more statistics." "About our failures," Morrison nodded respectfully. "That is exactly why we are here today. Earth proposes the creation of a new type of military force to combat this threat. We call them Knights." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds that the translation devices struggled to process. Clicking, screeching, and what could only be described as electronic laughter filled the air. Councillor Vexthara of the Tentacle Collective was the first to speak coherently, her voice dripping with amusement. "Knights? You mean those primitive warriors from your medieval period? The ones who rode animals and fought with metal sticks?" Her tentacles writhed with what appeared to be mirth. "Are you suggesting we send beings with swords to fight against plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes?" The laughter grew louder. Even the normally composed Andromedans seemed to find the human proposal amusing. Their leader, a being whose name, roughly translated to Crystal of Many Thoughts, spoke with barely contained condescension. "The human species continues to amaze us with their attachment to obsolete concepts. Honor, chivalry, noble sacrifice, these are relics of a less civilized age. Modern warfare requires efficiency, not romantic notions about heroic deeds." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. "With respect, Counselor, perhaps that is exactly the problem. Your civilizations have become so focused on technological advancement that you have forgotten the importance of the warrior spirit." This statement brought fresh waves of laughter. The hegemony representative, an ancient being whose cybernetic enhancements covered most of his original organic form, spoke with a voice like grinding gears. "Warrior spirit? We have calculated the optimal combat algorithms. We have developed weapons that can destroy entire star systems. What possible use could ancient human concepts have against modern threats?" Morrison held up his hand for silence. "Because your modern approaches are failing. The pirates succeed not because they have better technology, but because they have something your advanced civilizations have lost: the willingness to sacrifice everything for their cause. They fight with desperation and cunning while your forces fight with computers and calculations." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Councillor Vexthara spoke again, her voice now carrying an edge of irritation. "So your solution is to make our forces more like the pirates? To abandon reason for primitive emotion?" "No," Morrison replied firmly. "Our solution is to combine the best of both worlds. Advanced technology guided by ancient wisdom. Modern weapons wielded by warriors who understand that some things are worth dying for. The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, Korthsel spoke, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been curiosity. Explain these knights you propose. What training would they receive? What equipment would they carry? Morrison activated another series of holographic displays. Each knight would be a volunteer, selected not just for combat ability but for moral character. They would swear oaths to protect the innocent, to show mercy to defeated enemies, and to face danger with courage rather than flee from it. And their equipment? Pressed the hegemony representative. The finest technology available, but designed around the principle that the warrior matters more than the weapon. Personal energy shields, plasma swords, armor that enhances rather than replaces human capability. The laughter started again, but this time it seemed more forced, less certain. Counselor Vexthara's tentacles writhed with what might have been nervousness. You seriously propose to send individual warriors against organized pirate fleets? One person against hundreds? One knight against hundreds of pirates, Morrison corrected. There is a difference. A pirate fights for profit and runs when the odds turn against him. A knight fights for duty and stands firm even when defeat seems certain. The debate continued for hours, with delegate after delegate rising to point out the obvious flaws in the human proposal. The knights would be outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting against enemies who had no honor to constrain their tactics. Modern warfare was about orbital bombardments and fleet actions. Not individual heroics, but Morrison and his team answered each objection with calm determination. They spoke of battles throughout human history where small numbers of motivated warriors had defeated larger forces through superior morale and tactical flexibility. They explained how the knightly code of honor was not a weakness, but a strength that would inspire others to fight harder. As the session drew to a close, the laughter had died down, but the skepticism remained. The final vote was close, but the human proposal was approved by a narrow margin. The galaxy would allow Earth to deploy its knights, if only to prove once and for all that such primitive concepts had no place in modern civilization. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Morrison could hear whispered conversations in dozens of languages, all expressing the same basic sentiment. The humans were about to learn a hard lesson about the realities of galactic warfare. Their knights would be slaughtered, and then, perhaps, Earth would finally abandon these foolish notions about honor and heroism, but Jake Morrison smiled as he watched them leave. The galaxy was about to learn something about humanity that no amount of technology could teach. They were about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and the object happened to be wearing armor and carrying a sword. 3 weeks after the Galactic Council meeting, the military shipyard orbiting Earth buzzed with activity as the first squadron of knights prepared for their maiden deployment. The used Valiant hung in the dock like a sleeping giant, its hull gleaming with fresh armor plating and weapon systems that had been specifically designed for the new combat doctrine. Unlike the massive dreadnoughts favored by other galactic powers, the Valiant was built for speed and precision, capable of delivering small teams of highly trained warriors exactly where they needed to be. Squad leader Ben Carter stood in the ship's armory, running his hands along the edge of his plasma sword for the 100th time that morning. The weapon hummed with contained energy, its blade capable of cutting through any known material while remaining perfectly balanced in his grip. Around him, 11 other volunteers made their final preparations, each one chosen from thousands of applicants who had answered humanity's call for heroes. The armor they wore was a marvel of engineering that combined cutting-edge technology with designs inspired by Earth's greatest warriors throughout history. Energy shields projected from arm-mounted generators created barriers that resembled the tower shields of medieval knights, while advanced targeting systems were integrated seamlessly into helmets that bore the heraldic symbols of ancient orders. The chest plates displayed each knight's personal coat of arms, a tradition that had been revived for the new age of galactic warfare. Corporal Amy Walsh checked her tactical display one final time, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. That would have seemed like magic to the knights of old. The information flowing across her visor showed everything from enemy ship positions to atmospheric conditions on the target planet, all processed by computers that could think faster than any organic brain. Yet for all the advanced technology at her disposal, she knew that success would ultimately depend on the same qualities that had made knights legendary throughout human history: courage, honor, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the protection of innocence. "Listen up, people," Carter called out, his voice carrying clearly through the armory's communication system. "Intelligence reports show that the Crimson Swarm has hit the mining colony on Kepler 442b. They have taken approximately 3,000 civilian hostages and are demanding ransom from the Galactic Council. Local defense forces are overwhelmed and unable to mount an effective rescue operation." Sergeant Paul Jenkins, a former Marine who had embraced the knightly ideals with the fervor of a true believer, nodded grimly as he sealed his helmet. "What about enemy numbers and capabilities?" "The swarm is using their standard tactics," Walsh replied, her voice filtered through the armor's communication system. "Fast attack ships with cloaking devices, plasma cannons, and boarding parties equipped with military-grade cybernetic enhancements. They have positioned their ships in a defensive formation around the colony's main settlement, using the civilian population as human shields." Lieutenant Kevin Brooks, whose family claimed descent from actual medieval knights, tested the power cells in his energy shield generator. "Rules of engagement?" Carter's expression grew serious beneath his helmet's visor. "The Galactic Council has authorized us to use whatever force is necessary to neutralize the threat and rescue the hostages. However, we are knights first and soldiers second. We show mercy to those who surrender, we protect the innocent above all else, and we conduct ourselves with honor even in the heat of battle." The other members of the squad nodded in understanding. Specialist Dana Price, whose expertise in zero-gravity combat had earned her the nickname the Floating Paladin, finished securing her equipment harness. "What about backup? Are other Council forces standing by?" "The Council has made it clear that this is our test," Carter replied. "They want to see what these primitive human knights can accomplish against modern pirates. If we succeed, the knight corps will be expanded. If we fail, the program will be terminated and Earth will be expected to adopt more conventional military approaches." The weight of responsibility settled on the squad like a heavy cloak. They were not just fighting for the hostages on Kepler 442b, they were fighting for the future of everything they believed in. The galaxy had laughed at their ideals, dismissed their concepts of honor and chivalry as outdated relics that had no place in the modern age. This mission would either prove them right or validate every criticism that had been leveled against humanity's approach to warfare. As the Valiant's engines powered up for departure, the Knights made their way to the bridge where Captain Rodriguez waited with the ship's crew. The journey to Kepler 442b would take 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity, giving them time to review intelligence reports and finalize their battle plans. The target system appeared on the main view screen as they dropped out of hyperspace, its primary star casting harsh light across the rocky planets that orbited it. Kepler 442b was a typical mining world, its surface scarred by massive extraction operations that had been supplying rare minerals to the galactic economy for over a century. The planet's small population lived in pressurized domes scattered across the airless landscape, vulnerable to any attacker who could breach their defenses. Long-range sensors immediately detected the Crimson Swarm fleet. 23 ships of various sizes hung in orbit around the mining colony, their sleek hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce the settlement to rubble in minutes. The pirates had chosen their target well. The colony's isolation made it unlikely that help would arrive in time, while its economic importance guaranteed that someone would eventually pay the ransom. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. "The pirates are hailing us." Carter nodded to Captain Rodriguez. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of a Thrakari warlord whose original features had been heavily modified with cybernetic implants. Captain Zexkara of the Crimson Swarm was a legend among pirates, known for his ruthless tactics and complete lack of mercy toward his enemies. His voice carried the mechanical distortion of vocal enhancers as he spoke. "Another rescue ship? You mammals never learn, do you? Turn around and leave the system immediately, or I will add your crew to the list of casualties." Carter stepped forward, his knightly armor gleaming under the bridge's lighting. "I am Sir Benjamin Carter, Knight of the Terran Order, by the Authority. Vested in me by the Galactic Council, I demand that you release all hostages immediately and surrender your ships for inspection." The pirate captain's laughter was like the sound of grinding metal. "A knight? You humans truly are primitive. I have crushed civilizations with technology your species cannot even comprehend. My ships carry quantum torpedoes that can crack a planet's crust and plasma cannons that burn hotter than a star's core. What can one man in decorative armor possibly accomplish against such power?" "You are about to find out," Carter replied calmly, then signaled for the transmission to be cut. The battle was about to begin, and with it, the first test of whether ancient ideals could survive in the deadly arena of galactic warfare. The knights checked their weapons one final time as the Valiant moved into attack position, each warrior knowing that the eyes of the entire galaxy were watching their every move. The moment Captain Zexkara cut the transmission, his flagship Bloodrender opened fire with everything it had. Plasma bolts and quantum torpedoes streaked through space toward the used Valiant, each shot carrying enough destructive power to vaporize a city block. The other pirate ships joined the attack, creating a wall of deadly energy that would have overwhelmed any conventional vessel. But the Valiant was not a conventional vessel. Captain Rodriguez barked orders to her crew as the ships advanced defensive. Systems came online. Point defense lasers intercepted the incoming torpedoes while energy shields absorbed the plasma fire, causing the entire ship to glow with a brilliant blue light. The Valiant shuddered under the assault but held together, her reinforced hull designed specifically to withstand the concentrated firepower of pirate fleets. Ben Carter and his knights stood ready in the launch bay, their individual assault pods powered up and waiting. Each pod was a marvel of engineering, combining stealth technology with enough firepower to punch through enemy shields. More importantly, they were designed to deliver their occupants directly into the heart of enemy ships, where advanced weapons meant nothing and the battle would be decided by skill and courage. "Launch in 30 seconds, Rodriguez announced over the communication system. "Remember, people, the hostages are being held in the colony's main dome. Every second counts." Carter sealed his helmet and activated his armor's life support systems. Around him, the other knights made their final preparations with the calm efficiency of warriors who had accepted the possibility of death in service to their ideals. They were outnumbered 20-1, facing enemies equipped with the finest military technology that stolen wealth could buy, but none of them showed the slightest sign of fear. The launch bay doors opened to reveal the star-filled void of space. The Crimson Swarm fleet hung before them like a pack of metal predators, their weapons continuing to pour fire into the Valiant's shields. The pirates had grown confident over the years, certain that their superior technology and ruthless tactics made them unbeatable against any force the galaxy could send against them. "Knights of the Terran Order?" Carter spoke into his communication system as the launch countdown reached 0. "Today we prove that honor is not weakness and that courage is not obsolete, for the innocent, for justice, for humanity." The 12 assault pods shot out of the launch bay like bullets, their small size and stealth coating making them nearly impossible to detect until they were too close to stop. The pirates' automated defense systems struggled to track targets that moved with such speed and precision, their computer algorithms unable to predict the erratic flight patterns that human pilots used instinctively. Amy Walsh's pod was the first to reach the enemy fleet, her target being a medium-sized cruiser that was directing fire at the colony's defensive positions. Her pod's cutting laser sliced through the ship's hull like a sword through silk, creating an opening just large enough for her to pass through. The moment she entered the pirate vessel, her armor sensors detected the presence of 23 enemy combatants moving to intercept her. The first group of pirates that reached her position was equipped with the finest military cybernetics that money could buy. Their reflexes had been enhanced to superhuman levels, their weapons were linked directly to their nervous systems for perfect accuracy, and their bodies had been modified with armor plating that could deflect most small arms fire. They moved with mechanical precision, confident that their technological superiority would make short work of any organic opponent. They had never faced a night before. Walsh's plasma sword ignited with a brilliant blue flame as she stepped into the corridor, her energy shield deflecting the first volley of shots with ease. The pirate's enhanced reflexes meant nothing when faced with a warrior who had trained for years to read her opponent's movements and anticipate their tactics. Her blade found its mark again and again, cutting through cybernetic armor as if it were paper. Meanwhile, Paul Jenkins had breached the hull of the flagship Bloodrender itself. The ship's interior was a maze of corridors and chambers designed to confuse boarders, but Jenkins moved through them with the systematic precision of a trained soldier. His armor sensors guided him toward the ship's bridge, where Captain Zexkara waited with his elite guard. The pirate captain had surrounded himself with warriors from a dozen different species, each one chosen for their skill in combat and their complete lack of moral restraint. They fought with weapons that could level buildings and armor that had been stolen from military installations across the galaxy. But for all their technological advantages, they lacked the one thing that made the knights truly dangerous, the absolute certainty that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. Kevin Brooks and Dana Price worked together to assault the ship that was holding the majority of the hostages. Their pods had landed on opposite sides of the vessel, forcing the pirates to divide their forces to deal with two separate threats. The pirates' tactical computers recommended a defensive strategy, but their commanders overrode the advice, confident that their superior numbers would overwhelm the attackers. It was a fatal mistake. The knights moved through the enemy ships like avenging angels, their plasma swords cutting down anyone who stood in their way while their energy shields deflected return fire. They showed no mercy to those who continued to fight, but any pirate who dropped his weapon and surrendered was taken prisoner rather than killed. This distinction between combatants and non-combatants was something that the pirates had never encountered before, and it began to sow confusion in their ranks. Captain Zexkara watched the battle unfold from his command center, his cybernetic implants processing tactical data at superhuman speed. The computer models all agreed his forces should be winning easily. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting on enemy territory. By every logical calculation, they should already be dead, but logic had nothing to do with what was happening. The knights fought with an intensity that his warriors could not match, driven by ideals that his pragmatic mind could not comprehend. They accepted wounds that should have stopped them, pressed attacks that should have been suicide, and protected each other with a loyalty that transcended mere military discipline. The turning point came when Ben Carter reached the bridge of the Bloodrender. He had fought his way through deck after deck of the massive ship, his armor scarred by plasma fire and his energy shield flickering from repeated impacts. Any rational warrior would have retreated, but Carter pressed forward with the determination of a man who knew that thousands of innocent lives depended on his success. Captain Zexkara met him at the bridge entrance, his own weapons drawn and his cybernetic enhancements pushed to their maximum settings. The pirate captain was a formidable opponent, his reflexes enhanced beyond human capability and his weapons linked directly to his nervous system for perfect accuracy. The duel that followed would be remembered by those who witnessed it as the moment when two different philosophies of warfare clashed in their purest form. Technology against training, calculation against courage. The pursuit of power against the defense of justice. When the smoke cleared, Ben Carter stood victorious over the fallen pirate captain, his plasma sword still glowing with the energy that had ended the reign of one of the galaxy's most feared criminals. Around him, the surviving pirates threw down their weapons and surrendered, their confidence shattered by the defeat of their seemingly invincible leader. The first victory of the Knights was complete, but the real test was just beginning. Word of their success would spread throughout the galaxy, and with it, the realization that humanity's ancient ideals might not be as obsolete as everyone had believed. News of the Knights' victory at Kepler 442 be spread across the galaxy faster than any hyperspace transmission could travel. In the great cities of 1,000 worlds, beings gathered around communication screens to watch recordings of the battle that had been captured by automated defense systems. The images were grainy and incomplete, but they showed something that most galactic citizens had never seen before: individual warriors defeating technologically superior enemies through sheer determination and skill. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from dozens of species tried to understand what had happened. Counselor Vexthara's tentacles writhed with agitation as she reviewed the battle reports for the 5th time that day. The numbers made no sense according to conventional military doctrine. 12 humans had defeated over 300 pirates, captured their flagship, and rescued all the hostages without a single civilian casualty. "This is impossible," muttered the hegemony representative, his cybernetic implants flickering with the strain of processing data that contradicted everything his people believed about warfare. The pirates had quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, and military-grade cybernetic enhancements. The humans should have been slaughtered within minutes, but the evidence was undeniable. Captain Zexkara was dead, his fleet was captured, and the Crimson Swarm had suffered their first major defeat in over a decade. More disturbing to the established powers was the reaction of ordinary citizens throughout the galaxy. Young beings from dozens of different species were beginning to speak of the human Knights with something approaching reverence. On the mining world of Proxima 7, a group of Zephyrian workers had refused to follow evacuation orders when pirates attacked their facility. Instead, they had armed themselves with mining equipment and fought back, claiming they were inspired by the example of the Knights. The pirates had been driven off, but not before 3 of the workers had been killed in the fighting. Similar incidents were being reported from across the galaxy. Beings who had never shown interest in military service were volunteering for defense forces, claiming they wanted to fight like the human Knights. The rigid social hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization for millennia were being questioned by young people who had seen that courage could triumph over technology. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood in the command center of the newly commissioned UES Courage, watching as construction crews worked to complete 2 more ships of the same class. The success at Kepler 442b had convinced Earth's military leadership to expand the Knight Corps immediately, and volunteers were arriving from every corner of human space. The selection process was rigorous, requiring not just military skill, but also a demonstrated commitment to the ideals of honor and service. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Ryan Scott, his voice carrying a note of concern, "we're receiving intelligence reports from the Outer Rim. The remaining pirate fleets are forming some kind of alliance. It looks like they're planning a coordinated response to our operations." Rodriguez nodded grimly. She had expected this development. The pirates had operated independently for years, competing with each other for territory and resources. But the Knight's success had given them a common enemy, and desperate beings often made dangerous alliances. "What about the hegemony?" she asked. "Are they still maintaining their neutrality?" Scott's expression grew troubled. "That's where things get complicated. Our intelligence sources suggest that certain factions within the hegemony are providing support to the pirates. Nothing official, but weapon shipments and technical assistance that could only come from their military-industrial complex." The implications were staggering. The hegemony was one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations, their technology so advanced that it bordered on the incomprehensible. If they were actively opposing the Knights, the conflict would escalate beyond anything humanity had prepared for. Meanwhile, on the training world of New Avalon, the first generation of Knights was learning that their initial victory had been only the beginning. Master Sergeant William Hayes, a veteran of Earth's bloodiest conflicts, put the recruits through combat simulations that pushed them to their absolute limits. The training was designed to prepare them for enemies who would have learned from The Crimson Swarm's mistakes. The galaxy is watching us, Hayes told his students as they practiced sword work in the facility's main training hall. Every species that has ever dismissed humanity as primitive is now trying to understand how we accomplish the impossible. Some of them are impressed, but others are terrified of what we represent. Among the new recruits was a young woman named Patricia Coleman, whose tactical brilliance had already earned her the respect of her instructors. She had studied the battle recordings from Kepler 442b until she could recite every move the knights had made, and she understood better than most that future enemies would not make the same mistakes as the pirates. "Master Sergeant," she asked, "during a break in training, what happens when we face opponents who have studied our tactics and developed countermeasures?" Hayes smiled grimly. "Then we adapt, just as knights have always adapted throughout history. The weapons change, the armor evolves, but the principles remain the same. We protect the innocent, we show mercy to the defeated, and we never retreat from our duty." The training continued day and night as more ships joined the growing fleet. The U's Honor was launched from Earth's orbital shipyards, followed by the UES Valor and the UES Justice. Each vessel carried a full squadron of knights, their ranks filled with volunteers who had proven themselves worthy of the ancient title. But even as the Knight Corps expanded, disturbing reports continued to arrive from the Outer Rim. The Pirate Alliance was growing stronger, and their attacks were becoming more coordinated. Worse, intercepted communications suggested that they were receiving advanced weapons and tactical support from unknown sources. The breaking point came when the mining colony on Vega Prime sent out a desperate distress signal. The pirates had launched their largest assault yet, bringing together fleets from across the galaxy in a coordinated attack that was designed to prove that the Knights' victory at Kepler 442b had been nothing more than luck. Jake Morrison, now bearing the title of Knight Ambassador, stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council as reports of the attack flooded in. The pirates had brought over 200 ships to bear against a single mining colony, their goal being to inflict such massive casualties that the galaxy would lose faith in the Knights' ability to protect them. "The situation is critical," Morrison reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the crisis. "Our intelligence suggests that this is not just a pirate attack, but a coordinated effort to destroy the Knight Corps before it can become a threat to the established order." The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed the implications. If the Knights failed at Vega Prime, it would prove that their earlier success had been a fluke. The program would be terminated, and humanity would be forced to abandon their ideals in favor of more conventional military approaches, but if they succeeded against such overwhelming odds, it would signal the beginning of a new age in galactic warfare. The old assumptions about technology and power would be shattered, and every species in the galaxy would be forced to reconsider their fundamental beliefs about civilization and progress. Admiral Rodriguez received the orders to deploy to Vega Prime with mixed feelings. The Knights had proven themselves against pirates and criminals, but they had never faced a coordinated assault by enemies who had studied their tactics and prepared countermeasures. The upcoming battle would be more than just a military engagement. It would be a test of whether ancient ideals could survive in a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of honor. As the Knight Corps' fleet prepared to depart for Vega Prime, messages of support began arriving from unexpected sources. Young beings from dozens of species had volunteered to serve alongside the Knights, despite the protests of their governments. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization were beginning to crack, and through those cracks, the light of hope was beginning to shine. The greatest test of the Knights was about to begin, and with it, the future of the galaxy itself would be decided. The Vega system hung in space like a collection of jewels scattered across black velvet, its 3 inhabited worlds spinning slowly around a yellow star that had warmed them for billions of years. Vega Prime, the system's main colony world, was home to 12 million beings who had built their lives around the massive mining operations that supplied rare minerals to half the galaxy. Now those same beings cowered in underground shelters as the largest, Pirate fleet in galactic history descended upon their world like a plague of metal locusts. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Righteous, her flagship and the newest addition to the growing Night Corps fleet. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the enemy armada, spread out before them in a formation that spoke of careful planning and professional military coordination. Over 400 ships of various sizes and configurations hung in the void, their hulls bristling with weapons that represented the finest military technology that stolen wealth could acquire. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Scott, his voice tight with barely controlled tension. "Tactical analysis shows we're facing a combined fleet from at least 15 different pirate organizations. They have heavy cruisers, battle carriers, and what appears to be several Hegemony-class destroyers." Rodriguez felt a cold knot form in her stomach at the mention of Hegemony vessels. Those ships were not supposed to exist outside of official military service, their technology far too advanced to fall into pirate hands through simple theft. Someone with significant resources and political connections was backing this assault, turning what should have been a routine police action into something approaching open warfare. Knight Commander Ben Carter joined her at the tactical display, his scarred armor a testament to the battles he had fought since that first victory at Kepler 442b. In the months that had followed, he had led knights into action against pirates, slavers, and criminal cartels across the Outer Rim, each victory adding to the growing legend of humanity's champions. But this battle would be different, and they both knew it. The enemy has positioned themselves to use the civilian population as shields, Carter observed, studying the holographic representation of the battle space. "They're counting on us to limit our firepower to avoid collateral damage." They're not wrong," Rodriguez replied grimly. "We can't risk civilian casualties, even if it means accepting higher losses among our own forces. That's what separates us from them." The Night Corps' fleet numbered only 37 ships, each one carrying a full squadron of knights and equipped with the most advanced technology that human engineering could produce. They were outnumbered more than 10 to 1, facing enemies who had studied their tactics and prepared specific countermeasures for their fighting style. By every rational calculation, the upcoming battle should result in the complete destruction of the Night Corps and the end of humanity's experiment with warrior monks in space, but the Knights had never been about rational calculations, Sir Patricia. Coleman stood in the launch bay of the UES Honor, checking her equipment one final time as the ship moved into position. She had been promoted to Knight Captain after her tactical brilliance had saved 3 colonies from pirate attack, and now she commanded a full squadron of the finest warriors humanity had ever produced. Her knights came from every branch of human military service, united by their commitment to ideals that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive nonsense. "Remember," she addressed her squadron over the communication system, "we're not just fighting for the people of Vega Prime. We're fighting for the idea that some things are worth dying for, that honor and courage are not weakness, but the greatest strength any civilization can possess." The battle began with a coordinated assault by the enemy fleet that was designed to overwhelm the Knights through sheer volume of fire. Quantum torpedoes and plasma bolts filled space with deadly energy, as the pirates sought to destroy the human ships before they could deploy their assault teams. The UES Courage took a direct hit from a Hegemony destroyer and exploded in a brilliant flash that could be seen from the planet's surface, taking 37 Knights with her to their deaths, but the sacrifice was not in vain. The explosion provided cover for the remaining ships to close distance with the enemy fleet, and within minutes the void was filled with Knight assault pods racing toward their targets like metallic comets. The pirates had prepared for this tactic, installing additional point defense systems and deploying fighter squadrons to intercept the pods, but they had underestimated the skill and determination of their opponents. Sir Marcus Webb's pod punched through the hull of a pirate battle cruiser, his plasma sword already igniting as he rolled out of the wreckage. The corridor beyond was filled with enemy soldiers equipped with the finest military cybernetics that money could buy, their enhanced reflexes and targeting systems giving them advantages that should have made them unbeatable in close combat. Webb cut them down anyway, his movements a perfect fusion of ancient sword work and modern tactical training. Throughout the enemy fleet, similar scenes played out as knights breached hull after hull and engaged in the kind of brutal ship-to-ship fighting that the galaxy had not seen for centuries. The pirates fought with desperation born of greed and fear, while the knights fought with the calm certainty of warriors who had accepted death as the price of duty. On the bridge of the flagship Void Reaper, Admiral Kekthara of the Black Nebula, Syndicate watched his carefully planned assault begin to fall apart. His forces outnumbered the humans by an overwhelming margin, and his ships carried weapons that could crack a planet's crust. By every logical calculation, the battle should have been over within the first hour, with the Night Corps' fleet reduced to drifting wreckage and the legend of human invincibility shattered forever. Instead, he was watching his ships fall one by one to individual warriors, who seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to survive impossible odds. The tactical computers could not explain how a single human with a sword could defeat squads of cybernetically enhanced soldiers, or how night assault pods continued to function despite taking damage that should have destroyed them instantly. The turning point came when young beings from across the galaxy began to answer the call for help. Zephyrian youth who had been inspired by the Knight's example commandeered civilian ships and flew them into the battle zone, their crystal-based technology adding unexpected firepower to the human fleet. Andromedan dissidents who had grown tired of their people's emotional sterility broke ranks and joined the fight, their advanced sensors providing crucial tactical information. Even some members of the hegemony's own military forces began to defect, unable to reconcile their personal honor with their government's secret support for the pirates. These ships brought with them knowledge of the enemy's most advanced weapons and tactics, intelligence that proved crucial as the battle entered its final phase. Sir Helen Foster led the assault on the Void Reaper itself, her squadron of knights fighting their way through deck after deck of the massive vessel as Admiral Kekthara's elite guard tried desperately to stop them. The pirate admiral was a veteran of 100 battles, his tactical genius recognized throughout the criminal underworld, but he had never faced opponents who combined cutting-edge technology with an unshakable moral code. When Foster finally reached the flagship's bridge, she found Kekthara waiting with his personal guard and the best weapons that stolen military technology could provide. The battle that followed was brutal and decisive, ending with the pirate admiral's surrender and the collapse of the largest criminal fleet in galactic history. As the smoke cleared and the surviving pirate ships fled into hyperspace, the galaxy found itself facing a new reality. The Knights had not only survived their greatest test, but had proven that their earlier victories were no accident. Ancient ideals backed by modern technology had triumphed over pure technological superiority, and the implications would reshape galactic civilization forever. 6 months after the Battle of Vega Prime, the Galactic Council chambers had transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to the delegates who had once laughed at humanity's proposal for knights. Representatives from dozens of species now wore modified versions of knightly insignia on their formal robes, and the ancient symbols of honor and duty had become as common as the technological badges that had once dominated galactic politics. Knight Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the central podium where he had first presented the idea of spacefaring knights to a skeptical galaxy. The chamber was packed beyond capacity, with delegates from species that had never before shown interest in Galactic Council proceedings. Young beings from across known space had traveled to witness what many were calling the most important vote in galactic history. Honored delegates, Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber's acoustic systems. We gather today not to debate the merits of an untested concept, but to formalize what has already become reality. Throughout our galaxy, the age of pure technological supremacy is ending, and a new era of balanced progress is beginning. The silence in the chamber was respectful rather than mocking, a stark contrast to the derision that had greeted humanity's first presentation. The delegates had seen the reports from Vega Prime, had witnessed the footage of individual knights defeating technologically superior enemies through skill and determination. More importantly, they had observed the changes taking place in their own societies as young beings embraced the ideals that the knights represented. Counselor Vexthara, whose tentacles no longer writhed with amusement when humans spoke, rose to address the assembly. The Aquatic Collective has reviewed the data from the past year of night operations. The statistics are undeniable. Crime rates in systems protected by knights have decreased by 73%. Civilian casualties during military operations have been reduced to nearly zero. Most significantly, recruitment for defense forces across the galaxy has increased by over 300%. The Zephyrian delegate, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been pride, added his voice to the discussion. Our youth councils report that applications for military service have reached levels not seen since the Hive Wars. Young Zephyrians speak of honor and duty with an enthusiasm that was absent from our culture for generations. The Knights have reminded us of something we had forgotten in our pursuit of technological advancement. Even the hegemony representative, whose people had secretly supported the pirates at Vega Prime, stood to acknowledge the changes taking place. The Hegemony Council has conducted extensive analysis of the Knight phenomenon. Our conclusion is that the integration of moral principles with technological capability produces superior results in both military and civilian applications. We formally request admission to the proposed Galactic Order of Knights. The admission sent ripples of surprise through the chamber. The hegemony had been one of the most vocal critics of human ideals, dismissing concepts like honor and chivalry as primitive obstacles to progress. Their request for membership in the Knightly Order represented a fundamental shift in galactic thinking. Knight Commander Ben Carter, now bearing the title of Grand Marshal of the Galactic Order, joined Morrison at the podium. His armor bore the scars of dozens of battles, and his presence commanded respect from beings who had once considered humans to be an inferior species. The transformation was not just in how others viewed humanity, but in how humanity viewed itself. The order we propose is not about human supremacy, Carter explained to the assembled delegates. It is about universal principles that transcend species boundaries. Courage, honor, mercy, and justice are not human concepts. They are the foundation upon which any truly advanced civilization must be built. The voting process took 3 days as delegates consulted with their home governments and debated the implications of the proposed changes. The establishment of the Galactic Order of Knights would fundamentally alter the balance of power that had existed for millennia, replacing systems based purely on technological capability with structures that valued moral character alongside scientific achievement. When the final votes were tallied, the measure passed with overwhelming support. Only 3 species voted against the proposal, and even they acknowledged that the changes were inevitable given the popular support for knightly ideals. Among their own populations, Admiral Lisa Rodriguez watched the proceedings from the observation gallery, reflecting on how much had changed since that first deployment to Kepler 442b. The Knight Corps had grown from 12 volunteers to over 10,000 active members, with training academies established on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. The converted pirate strongholds now served as centers of learning, where young beings from every species studied the fusion of technology and honor that had made the Knights successful. The former pirate fortress of Blood Moon Station had been transformed into the primary academy for knight training. Sir Patricia Coleman served as its commandant, overseeing the education of cadets who represented the best that galactic civilization had to offer. The training was rigorous, requiring not just military excellence but also demonstrated commitment to the protection of innocent life and the pursuit of justice. The hardest lesson for most cadets to learn, Coleman often told visiting dignitaries, is not how to fight effectively, but when not to fight at all. A true knight understands that violence is always the last resort, to be used only when all other options have been exhausted. The Academy's halls were filled with beings whose appearance would have seemed impossible just a year before. young Andromedans learning to express emotion in service to their ideals, hegemony nobles studying ancient Earth texts on chivalry, and Zephyrian youth practicing sword work alongside human instructors. The barriers between species were breaking down as shared values proved more important than biological differences. The changes extended far beyond military applications. Civilian governments throughout the galaxy had begun adopting codes of conduct based on knightly principles, emphasizing service to citizens over accumulation of power. Trade disputes that once would have escalated to armed conflict were now resolved through negotiation guided by concepts of honor and fair dealing. The transformation was not without its challenges. Conservative factions within several species resisted the changes, arguing that traditional hierarchies and technological focus had served their civilizations well for millennia. Some regions of the galaxy remained hostile to the new ideals, creating pockets of resistance that would require careful handling in the years to come, but the momentum was undeniable. Young beings across the galaxy had embraced the vision of a civilization that valued character alongside capability, and their enthusiasm was reshaping societies that had grown stagnant under the weight of technological determinism. As the Galactic Council session concluded with the formal establishment of the Order of Knights, Ambassador Morrison found himself thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. The galaxy had laughed at the idea of spacefaring knights, dismissing honor and chivalry as primitive concepts that had no place in the modern age, but humanity had proven that some things were timeless, that the values that had inspired heroes throughout history were not relics of the past, but essential ingredients for any civilization that hoped to reach its full potential. The marriage of technology and honor had created something greater than either could achieve alone. The age of knights had begun in earnest, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, where new threats would always emerge, the knights stood ready to meet them with weapons forged from the finest technology and hearts guided by the oldest and most noble ideals of sentient civilization. The laughter had ended, replaced by something far more powerful, hope for a future where strength served justice and power protected the innocent. The knights had not just won battles against pirates and criminals, they had won the war for the soul of galactic civilization itself.